Cheers to the new staff photographer.
I just got lucky.
This is so wonderful for you.
Well, you might want to tell JJ to make a little more wall space. Oh, good morning. It's a beautiful day, huh? What was it you said? I'll never get that picture? There's your hero.
Huh. I never thought he'd really do that.
See? Right there. You made a judgment call. You gotta see it as it is.
It's funny you should say that, because I was looking through some old photos and it looks very, similar.
Okay. Well, I gotta get back to work.
You're trash, Brock.
Excuse me?
Your picture's a fake.
Oh, Parker, you are such a Boy Scout. When are you gonna give a guy a break?
You want forgiveness? Get religion.
What's going on here?
Are you guys all right?
Yeah, no, we're just horsing around.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 187 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm Becca and as always joined by fellow co-hosts Chris and Dave. How are you both?
Good evening, folks.
I don't know about you, but I like to get my revenge by eating pie and giving him a cheeky wink before disappearing randomly.
That's the best way to do it.
Oh, it's so good.
Not for oozing your way into some kind of symbiotic host type creature.
Yeah, I just love this film's definition of evil. And there's some logical messes in this. Didn't he eat fruit at one point, Chris?
There must be a fruity corner in there somewhere.
There's got to be a fruity corner in this film somewhere. And sub-question, do we count the fruit in a pie? So if he's eating, like, you know, blueberry pie or something, would that count?
Does it count?
Would it count for the fruit?
Does it count
I think
the day?
it does when you randomly disappear, but so it obviously means you don't pay for it. You just bug it off. I think that's
Right.
technically evil, isn't it?
I suppose so. It's technically illegal, but then
Technically stealing.
so are certain parking violations. But I don't expect supervillains to be hanging their strategies on it.
I kind of want to see like the waitress reaction of like seeing like I've seen like James Franco just like sort of like stood in the corner sort of like giggling to himself going
Yeah, this film's. I really don't like James Franco in this film, but I think a lot of that is just I don't like the actor very much. But
he's a lot more Franco in this than
He does go full Franco, doesn't he?
than in the other film, especially with all like my best friends. When he gets hit in the head and he's all.
Oh, it's all soap opera for a bit. We'll get to it. Spider-Man 3. This was back in the day. I was reading the Empire magazines and all the rest of it, and I mean, I see reviews around now, but I don't seek them out in the same way, really. You know, occasionally I'll read a few. Sometimes I'll write one on something, and then never before, but sometimes after I've written it, I'll just go and see how in tune I am with opinion and stuff like that. But back then, I was actually reading full reviews. Rotten Tomatoes was a thing, and this just wasn't scoring that well. But it wasn't scoring it was scoring like a bad blockbuster, where in a series where the other entries tend to be quite good. We've seen this before. Phantom Menace is sat on 62, 64%, something like that. When a weaker Bond film comes out, it scores around there. It's almost like you can't believe something bad's come out in this series, so people most, a high number of reviewers will sort of say, well, it was all right, I suppose. And
It
then
was
you
okay.
read between the lines, and it's clearly not very good.
It's that like 3-star rating, isn't it? You read in Empire or whatever it is, and it's
Yeah,
that
they
kind
did
of
actually
like
give it 3 stars.
there's two types of like 3-star rating. There's like
Yeah.
3 stars. It was alright actually. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, rather enjoyed it. 3 stars. It's like yeah, well.
Yeah.
3 stars out of 6. You think, oh, but yeah, no, Empire said that. Yeah, still smart, still exciting,
It's
still
good, I guess. You know.
So it was quite clear. It was very like reviews for something like Spectre. And it was just quite clear we weren't seeing anything special. And my heart sank because they announced it was going to be Venom. Venom was a bit of a thing.
Yeah, it's a big fan favourite.
Yeah, huge fan favourite. In fact, I watched, not all of it, but I watched some of the symbiote episodes of the 90s show. There's 3 of them, and I watched most of the first one the other day. And it's just better. I mean, I'm not in love with that version of Spider-Man particularly, but it's just so much more smartly plotted. The 90s seemed to be a pretty good time for animated superhero.
Yeah, there seems to be quite a lot of it, wasn't there?
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, well, Batman, the animated series, obviously, and not long
Of course,
after that, there
definitely.
was the animated
X-Men.
Superman series, the X-Men one.
Yes, that's a lot of nostalgia value there. So.
But it's not just nostalgia. I'd argue they're actually pretty good.
Oh god, yeah, no, X-Men is probably one of my favourites back in the day. So.
Yeah, I mean, but that version of Batman is a lot of people's Batman. It just is.
Definitely, that's a big go-to.
I've got some issues with it. I don't love it as much as some people, but it is solid. And you see the whole Rogues Gallery several times. You have some really, I mean, something like Heart of Ice is brilliant. You go and see the Mr. Freeze episodes of the Batman the Animated Series. They're terrific. And I think this series equivalent was the Symbiote one, which I don't think it's called that. I can't remember what the episode's called now. But it's I said it was a 3-parter last week, and I thought afterwards, was it more than that? And I looked, and it is a 3-parter. And they're about 20 minutes episodes, so you're talking about an hour, which is, it's not bad to tell a story, particularly one for primarily aimed at kids. Certainly the Superman animated series I thought was really good. It had it was influenced a little bit by the Batman series, and in turn Fleischer. They were both sort of influenced by Fleischer. So it was really disappointing. But then I heard Sandman was going to be in it, and I can't remember the Sandman episodes, if there were any of the animated series. Maybe I didn't see them, maybe there weren't any. But it's not a character I knew that well. And then it said it was going to be Thomas Hayden Church, and I'd just seen him in Sideways.
I think that's how he got the role. He was literally, they kind of, he'd obviously just come out of that film, and the directors and producers and filmmakers were like,
in Sideways,
he's the one.
He carries a similar energy in Sideways to somebody like Ben Mendelsohn when he's not playing evil.
Yeah, he's not typecast as the villain.
In fact, there's even a passing resemblance to the way someone like Ben Mendelsohn looked in that Bloodline series I've mentioned a few times.
Oh yeah, that was a good show.
It was very slow, but the first season is good, and it's a really pretty show with a really good cast as well. But you stop after the first series; it's not worth it after that. But what a cast! I mean, it's just a really, really good cast for a television show. But so I just thought, well, I don't know about this. Then I heard Harry was going to make the full turn to evil, and I just thought, 3 villains in and of itself isn't necessarily a death knell. But it's not positive, particularly as a character like Venom really needs setting up. So I was worried about this. What about you guys? Not, just before you went to see it and so on.
Becca, what?
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember. It was a long time ago now.
I remember being like excited, like with everyone else, or at least like intrigued of what they were going to do. I mean, I remember like the rumors flying about, like it was like Topher Grace was cast, and there was like,
and I couldn't see it, like, as Eddie Brock, really.
Well, I remember particularly at the time they hadn't confirmed it was Eddie Brock, but there were rumors. But then like there was always talk about them being 3 villains, and there was like, well, I can remember it's like sort of there's some sort of, it might have been before Sandman. It was not, but it was like I heard someone suggest like a chameleon as like, he could be like the opposite to Peter, and try and like sort of get getting sort of like his private life a bit more and sort of manipulate him that way. But I don't know. It was. I remember being excited. It's definitely excitement because it was Venom. There was also a bit of. I remember being a bit curious to see how they were going to do it. But I was generally like excited because I remember the second films and being like, yeah, they were pretty good. And this should be quite epic. So it was like I remember seeing it like opening day, like sort of it was midday. It was a hot summer day as well. So I remember just roasting my car and driving back on the way home. But I just remember my excitement and being kind of very disappointed on the way back.
It was one of those things that kind of, it was like the summer, well, it was the movie of 2007, wasn't it? I think at the time, or for a time, it was like, certainly in the US, it was like the highest grossing film of that year.
I am going to look it up actually because I want to.
Or at least one of the highest grossing films of that year.
Yeah, no, I just want to remind
US
myself what else was that year. I think Ratatouille was that year. So I don't think it was one of the very biggest Pixar films.
You had Transformers.
Right, you had this is the highest. These are the highest grossing films of 2007. I'll read from sort of top to bottom, i.e. the highest, and this is worldwide gross. So the top grossing film of the year was Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End,
of course,
which was unwatchable fucking dreck.
But made as a money.
I'm pretty sure that was the one I got about 40 minutes through and went fuck it. Mind you, it might have been the second one.
This movie.
Second highest grossing film is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which I would argue is one of the lesser Harry Potter films. Yeah. Then you got this one. Then you've got Shrek the Third, which is not a particularly good Shrek film. Then you've got Transformers, which is the best Transformers film, but that's not saying much.
Oh dear.
Then you've got Ratatouille, which again, I quite like Ratatouille, but and we will do Pixar, not in terms of quality, but in terms of size, reputation, everything. It's kind of lesser Pixar. I Am Legend, which
isn't forgettable.
Had its ending changed after a test screening, which tells you everything. Then you had the Simpsons movie.
Yeah.
National Treasure Book of Secrets, so the sequel to a fucking
the sequel to a ride.
I've never watched it, to be
fair. It was based on a ride.
I've never watched it. I'm not fond of Nicolas Cage, and I just thought it looked like him, just like, money.
It's probably like the most family-friendly film he's ever made.
Number 10 was 300. So I would argue this is not a great year. I don't know what you guys think of that.
Classic year for film.
That is not
you
a
had
classic
Born
year.
Ultimatum, you had There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men. That was like...
Yeah, although having said that, most of the last two
The Simpsons movie, if you like Simpsons.
The last two you just mentioned, we didn't get till 2008 because it was in the following years.
Oh, right, yeah, okay, fair enough.
I'm talking about summer, really. I mean, there were some good films.
Hot Fuzz?
Hot Fuzz was out earlier in the year. Yeah,
Born Ultimatum.
Yeah. Each 13.
Sweeney Todd. I don't know when that. I can't remember when that was released.
I think that was earlier in the year as well.
I went to see that. It was awful.
It was a film. I know
it was a film.
Chuck
Yeah,
and
only
Larry,
because a friend of mine
which
was
might be
appearing
one
in
of
the stage musical of the same name.
I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry, which may be one of the worst films I've ever seen on the big screen.
Norbit. Would argue that one probably.
The tail end of his career.
In the autumn, you had 3:10 to Yuma, the remake. That had Glenn Ford, Clark Kent's dad in the original, in the Russell Crowe role. Darjeeling Limited, Resident Evil Extinction.
Alien v Predator.
That was the third one. Yeah, God almighty. So they were like every year.
And Stardust, which is a film the probably did,
which is amazing. You must see it.
I didn't do well, but I always really like it. I mean, I quite like Matthew Vaughn.
It must be seen by everybody.
I seem to like all his films, really.
Who was it?
Matthew Vaughn.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it was his follow-up from Layer Cake, and he did this like weird sort of fantasy.
Yeah, I know
based
of
on the
it.
Neil Gaiman book.
I know of it. That's got Michelle Pfeiffer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
really
Ben Affleck made his directorial debut this year with Gone Baby Gone, There's plenty of decent films this year.
Oh,
That's
God, was
not
that
what
you
I'm
as well? Oh
saying.
my
I'm
gosh,
just
I
saying.
forgot about
I'm literally talking about like blockbuster season. It's not that strong a year.
I
Yeah,
mean,
so it's kind of sequels and remakes again, isn't it?
Juno,
No, I don't.
starring the woman
Yeah, you know what,
Chris
this-
referred to as.
I remember that like this was the year where like there was lots of like third sequels. So you had Pirates of the Caribbean 3, Spider-Man 3, Rush Hour 3. What else? There was another one as well. I'm sure. Born Ultimatum. That was
Shrek 3.
Shrek 3.
Yeah.
Ocean's 13.
Yeah, which is the third film for anyone who's not seen
Yeah.
that series.
Yeah, there just seems to be like loads of like third movies.
Yeah, and they were
Particularly
all, and most of them were disappointing. But the Bourne Ultimatum, I need to watch again. But I seem to remember that coming out just fine. But some of these series, their second entry was the strongest, or at least in public consciousness is the strongest. Because my memory of the Bourne series is I like Identity best, but certainly the Supremacy was the one that really caught the public's imagination.
And then next year you had Iron Man and The Dark Knight.
Yes.
And Indiana Jones 4.
That was clearly a good year for cinema.
But we won't talk about Indiana
And
Jones
what?
4.
Sorry, Indiana Jones.
But apart from that,
Yeah, the fourth in the trilogy.
And The Spirit. Who could forget The Spirit?
The Spirit
oh gosh,
was one of the most disappointing cinema experiences I've ever had, only because it's really, really terrible, but it just about picks up enough in the second half to avoid being like legendarily terrible. It's a bad film. It's a really, really bad film. Because I remember sitting with my father last couple of years of his life. I was at his house and he was talking about worst films he'd ever seen. And when people talk about the worst films they've ever seen, they normally haven't seen that many films. They'll name something really mainstream and a bit disappointing.
Yeah. It's like the Commode thing, isn't it? It says that you've not seen, like, you not had to sit through films like Bloodsuckers from Mars, that kind of thing.
No,
no, you have
I
to sit
know.
through like Troll 2 and things like that.
You know, he said, my dad said, because he'd had a terrible experience with Quantum of Solace, so he mentioned Quantum of Solace, and he had Sky Movies at the time. And I said, I can't be certain, but I'm pretty sure if I switch on your Sky box now, I could find a film starting within the next hour that's worse than Quantum of Solace. And I turned it on in about 5 minutes' time. The Spirit started.
Oh, there it is.
I went, there you are. I promise you faithfully that was worse than Quantum of Solace. And of course, he shut up after that.
And he was like, "Yep, that's the worst film I've
No,
ever seen."
to be fair to him, he didn't start getting all defensive. And no, he went, "No, I'm off free."
Ooh.
He was like, "Yeah, you're right. Point taken." But yeah, this film, it was just one of those years where everything was a disappointment. And then at the end of the year and going into the Oscar season, it was a really strong year. But yeah, this was a poor summer season. It followed up a poor summer season the previous year as well. I'm trying to think when the next really good year was. Yeah, I suppose it would be the following year, Dark Knight, Iron Man, etc.
Yeah, and I think 2011, 2012 was a fairly strong year as well. But in terms of Oscars, just in terms of like critical success, but in terms of like Oscars, then maybe not.
Yeah, it depends. Every year's a mixed bag, but having just read...
But it was especially mixed bag.
Yeah, this was all over the place. I've just realised, off air we were talking about next week's film, so I've called up the synopses of the wrong film.
Oh dear.
I need to find
But
Spider-Man.
it's quite similar. You've got like Spider-Man, and you've got like the Amazing Spider-Man, but it's like the Amazing Spider-Man.
Well, Spider-Man should always have a hyphen in it.
Yeah.
It does annoy me when I see people write it wrong.
Spider-Man.
It was one of the big things Stan Lee said when he...
Well, like, yeah, it must be hyphen.
He said it's got to be a hyphen. He said first the main reason is actually to distinguish it from like Superman and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, they don't... It's not like super hyphen man, bat hyphen man.
No, it's not. But
then obviously you've got...
Yeah.
In the Batman kind of universe, you've got man bat as well, and that is like ban hyphen bat.
Yeah, that's Charlie was watching that the other night because it's the second episode of the Batman the Animated Series is the Man Bat episode.
Yeah, I need to catch that. It's only because I've been playing the Lego game.
It's really dark, actually. It was the first sign that wasn't just for kids.
For adults too.
Man Bat is kind of not unlike the Lizard as a villain, really.
No, they do seem similar to me, just because
They are kind of
that's
similar.
only I know just like through the game. So
Just in terms of like, scientists experimenting on something and it going wrong, and
Goes
this
horribly wrong.
metamorphosis now and again. But more on the lizard next week. So Spider-Man 3. Opening thoughts. I think I'd like to sort of get to the detail fairly quickly.
Let's do it.
We've covered. No, we will do opening thoughts, but I don't want to say a massive amount at this stage. I think I've seen worse. When people talk about this film, you think it was a Batman and Robin or something, and so bad it was almost like a campy fun or something. It's just a mess. That's the problem. It doesn't look like anyone's heart's in it, and all the negatives about the first two films, like the Peter Mary Jane relationship and Tobey Maguire's bloody crime, it's just more so in this film. There were rumours, and I think two things really back this up. Well, Sam Raimi's almost admitted it, really. Firstly, Sam Raimi's almost sort of said he dropped the ball on this film. But the studio wanted Venom. Sam Raimi, as a Silver Age fan, wanted the Vulture. And he wanted the Vulture... Hang on, no, that was Spider-Man 4. Sorry, my mistake, listeners, sorry. He wanted just Sandman as the villain for this. He wanted the Vulture in a fourth film. And there was talk of it being John Malkovich.
He's sort of planned like fourth, fifth, and sixth film, hadn't he? He's sort of planned a whole
I don't know.
series out, I think.
You're the one with all the facts. But when he did 4, it got announced for 2011. They got a certain way with it, and then it just got abandoned because Sam said, I don't really have a story here. So that makes me unsure that he had a plan.
I heard of an epic opening for it that sounded like really good.
I haven't heard of that.
I think what it was, of what I've heard, is like it was going to be like a little bit of it'll start with like a bit of a montage where you'd see like a lot of the classic villains getting caught. So it would be like, brief sort of encounters where like, you get like a sweet snapshot of like, like maybe like turns like Rhino and things like that, and Spider-Man defeating them, and then it'll cut with like him bringing Mysterio in, and it turned out to be Bruce Campbell. I thought, like, what a great way to open up the fourth film.
Actually, I that rings a bell. Bruce Campbell as Mysterio rings a bell, but I feel like that's the only bit I read. But he said that he didn't have an idea, which tells me a couple of things. Firstly, I don't think he had a plan, but I'm willing to be told different. But secondly, it tells me that he really wasn't satisfied with 3, in that he almost wanted a fourth to wipe away, because 3 was such a bad way to go out, that he signed to do it without even considering whether he had anything there to do. It's just a mess. I mean, the Venom character gets forced on him, we believe. That's hearsay, but the end result is certainly evidence of it. And he takes a character I was excited for and gives it so little time and so little understanding of what made the character work. He did the right thing bonding it to Peter first, but there's an awful lot of happenstance about all of that anyway. It doesn't make for an interesting design in the black suit on him. It just looks like his regular suit's been painted black apart from the eyes. When it goes on to like Eddie Brock is again, what is it with Sam Raimi casting like whiny men in this? Because Eddie Brock is a bit of a fucking bruiser in my memory.
I think he's kind of, because Topher Grace is probably more, well, to me anyway, sort of known for being in like that 70s show, and more sort of like comedic or like romantic roles. So
Topher Grace is not a bad actor.
No, he's quite good, but just in this, I kind of feel a little bit like, I prefer Tom Hardy.
He's doing what he was hired for.
I'm going to go with probably the unpopular opinion of the episode. I actually don't mind Topher Grace as Eddie Brock, as an idea as well, particularly. I think a lot of like the common opinion is, as you say, Dave, he's a big bruiser, and that's how he is in the comics. But I like the idea of him kind of being like a parallel opposite to Peter. Do you know what I mean? I don't mind that as an idea, and I think that's kind of like... I have
to say one thing that backs you up, and that's only that I've got to be careful how far I go with this. It's not like the comics, because I get very pissed off on social media where someone who doesn't read comics expresses an opinion, and then someone piles in with, "You obviously don't read comics." But also, we're going to do the X-Men series one day, which takes a massive shit over the comics, and I'm not going to care because I wasn't into the comics. So the familial relationships all being different, and who's evil, and what characters they did justice and what ones they didn't, utterly irrelevant.
You can enjoy them without, I think. It's the same.
That's not Wolverine. He's the definitive Wolverine, and yet that is very little like the comic Wolverine.
He's made the part his own, really. I can't imagine anybody else playing that role.
Well, they wouldn't play his version, would they?
Well, no, but you know what I mean, though.
You might get a comic book one with a... Well, I know, what's he called, threw his hat into the ring as wanting to do it, Taron Egerton.
Oh, yes, that's true.
And when you think Wolverine in the comics is a little short ass, that might work.
You can make him look taller, it's fine.
No, I didn't mean that as an insult. I mean, that's correct. Get a slightly diminutive guy to do it.
You'd probably go for more gruff character actor next time round and be a bit more like the comic I would have thought. Because you can't just like go for charming, handsome leading man next time round.
No,
because it's been done. Hugh Jackman did it.
But more on that in about 4 or 5 series time. It's
coming
on the list.
soon.
Yeah, coming soonish.
Soonish. To you.
We've got a few in the way, but it's definitely there, and it's not that far down the line. But I think there's a lot of name checking in this because Gwen Stacy's in this, and it's not really Gwen Stacy. Physically, it might sort of be, but that's it. Everyone now is looking ridiculously too old. I mean,
even
Bryce
Toby's
Dallas
too old.
Bryce Dallas Howard's about 26 here, and again, she looks it. She doesn't pass for a teenager in any way, shape, or form. Peter is really fucking irritating in this film. Mary Jane is really unlikable in this film. The villains are wasted. The Sandman is incredibly one-dimensional. And it's just a mess. But we've seen worse. So I think we are going to give this film a bit of a kick in tonight. But it's by far the worst of the 3. It's one of the worst Spider-Man films. I think we've got at least one worse that's to come. But the one that's to come that's worse, I actually enjoyed more on first viewing. When I watched it again, it utterly fell apart. But Spider-Man 3 is a mess, and it's a sad end to Sam Raimi's involvement with the series. That's all I really want to say at the outset. What about you guys as sort of opening thoughts?
Becca, what is your thoughts?
Yeah, what is my thoughts? What are in my brain? So I probably saw this film from release, and it's fair to say I haven't seen it since. I was probably one of these people who kind of came out thinking, oh, it's okay, ultimately a disappointing ending to what could have been a great series. But yeah, watching it again for this episode this evening, it was kind of by turns hilarious and dire. I think it kind of has those sort of problems where this is going to sound really stupid, but like if there's lots of writers, lots of fingers in the pies, the ideas get quite muddled. There's some really, it's not all bad. It's kind of, when we were sort of initially talking about it, we kind of thought, this is probably going to be like the worst film in the series. For me, it is anyway. But there are kind of pockets of light and some really, really interesting character moments. But generally, for me, I think they make the second Amazing Spider-Man film. It kind of suffers for being too busy. There's a lot going on. Obviously, you've got the duality between Venom and Spider-Man, and the whole kind of Venom's backstory and where he comes from. And also you've got Sandman as well, where he comes from, and you've also kind of got like the love triangle as well. I struggle because it packs so much in. And the film is already, I think it's 2 hours 20 or something, so it's the longest in this trilogy, certainly.
It's too long.
Just a little bit too long, but it's quite busy, and there's got a lot of unfocused energy, and there's just a lot going on, really. You could chop half of it out, and you'd be left with a much better film. That's my review in a summary.
I've actually made a few throughout. Usually what I do for when we review these films, I kind of like make notes as I'm watching, and it is mostly for like talk through the film sequentially. So I kind of make like almost like a.
You're organised.
No, it's handy because we do get stuck on where we are sometimes.
So
yeah.
I kind of like bullet point the scenes kind of thing, kind of like So this scene's there, and then like that, and I've actually sort of like did a few time codes. So like and one of them is when the symbiote actually attaches to Peter's suit, as in like probably one of the key plot points of the film. We're an hour in the film, and you're thinking like for any logical story of doing the venom, this needs to be your first plot point. This needs to happen in the first
really early on in the film.
This is like an hour in already, and he's already kind of like dealing with Sandman, and there's the stuff.
And yet, how much time do we waste on silly conversations with Rosemary Harris and stuff? And like
beautiful scenes, but you just don't need them.
Harry and MJ.
But Dave, it's like even in that regard, like he actually has a first clash with Sandman, actual Sandman, 50 minutes in the film. Do you know what I mean?
I'd be interested to remind myself what happens in the first fucking 50 minutes.
Do you know what I mean? It does just. There's just so much in this film, and I think
they don't know what to do with Sandman either, because he just floats off at the end.
Well, he's there to.
He survives.
The thing with Sandman is the whole thing is meant to be like the full Peter arc. It's all brings everything together about Uncle Ben. It wasn't he's really Uncle Ben's killer, but end of the day he's not such a bad guy. I mean they kind of retcon it because they kind of like treats in the flashback memory he kind of like hugs Uncle Ben out, and he's like a dodderied old man. He's like, oh, okay, I'm just getting out the car. Oh, what's going on? And it's a bit. It doesn't seem that. I'm pretty sure Uncle Ben in the first one wasn't like that doddery. That sort of like.
I was going to say he aged. I noticed it in the little cameo he's got in the second one in the dream sequence. I noticed he looked a touch older there. By this one, he actually looks. He looks about 20 years older than in the. Now, I might be exaggerating there, but he looks significantly older than in the first film, doesn't he?
So that might well be the case, but I don't know. It kind of felt like they played it that way to kind of for the scene itself.
The sympathy, do you think?
Yeah, kind of thing. So he kind of like just goes to sort of opens the door and just says, "Oh, okay, man, don't worry. You're just I'm just lifting you out. Oh, there you go. Not to worry." Do you know what I mean? It just felt a bit too retconned for what actually happened. And I don't know. I kind of it's a funny thing when it comes to like these type of things, because I don't think next week, the thing about superheroes and like, well, particularly with like vigilante, should we say? I'm going to sort of mention a film that's probably can't doesn't get often mentioned in terms of Spider-Man, particularly in something like this film, Death Wish, right? Now that film gets like the vigilante crime fighting thing mindset right, as in something horrible happened to him, he doesn't know who did it, so therefore he goes out on the street, just crime is the enemy, because if he knows who did it, then it'd be a straight up revenge story. Do you know what I mean? So there's something that the next week Spider-Man gets right in terms of like the killing of Uncle Ben. He never does find the guy. He goes out looking for him because he's just fighting random people, hoping to find him, but he never eventually finds him. Do you know what I mean?
The film doesn't handle it that well in that it kind of unceremoniously drops that point in a strange way.
Yeah, that's a bit odd.
I don't, but you kind of it was a decent idea.
So, yeah. I mean, I suppose in this, to be fair to the first movie, it's kind of he finds him and he ends up like killing himself, so to speak. This time around, kind of a bit undermines that. It kind of just a bit. I don't like the idea of Uncle Ben's killer being like, oh, well, it was just an accident, because it just kind of like undermines the need for Spider-Man. Do you know what I mean? If it was like, if all just thought it was just a big misunderstanding. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's probably an argument for it.
It doesn't really work either, because he's begging for like mercy in the first film, and if this had ever been plotted out, which it wasn't, obviously, you would have, I didn't shoot him. You know what I mean? It's just a mess. It's a soap opera-y mess, and in some respects, I felt a bit sorry that for Andrew Garfield in the next iteration that he didn't get a trilogy. But on the other hand,
he's kind of left a little bit lacking there, wasn't he?
This is evidence that like if you don't have one to tell and you don't have it like properly figured out, it does become a soapy mess. You know, they want Harry to be a villain, but they still need him to have some time with Peter, so they go with that silly plot point, which it is like American daytime soap opera. It's like, you know, Mary Jane's pregnant, but only one of them is Peter's. It's we went through this with the Fast franchise for weeks.
Yeah.
It's a really badly plotted film.
Yeah, I mean, and also, you know, Sandman himself is just... Raimi has, in terms of his villains, he likes to have like his villains as like not all that bad, really. And, you know, I mean, I suppose, yes, we have Venom, but, you know, sometimes I just need a villain to be a bit of a shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, there's nothing wrong with like saying, yeah, all right, you know, there is evil out there. Sometimes it's grey. Sometimes it's like good people who just turn bad, or there are good reasons for why they go the way they do. But sometimes they're just absolute cunts in the world that just need the shit kicked out of. Do you know what I mean? You know,
Yeah, I know. I don't mind it so much when it's methods. Motivations. In that, Charlie used to say that a lot. You know, he said it on one of our podcasts. Why can't they just want to rob a fucking bank?
This is it.
And I take
That's what did last week. You know, took these bizarre random coins.
But when the motive is always kind of like a good one, that pisses me off. So in the first film, he's just trying to save his company. In the second film, he's trying to give clean energy to the world. In this one, Sandman is only doing it for his daughter.
Yeah, he's just trying to get them.
it's such like sort of like he says to her, "I'm not a bad man. I just have bad luck." And I think that's
it's not bad luck to be holding a gun at a pensioner.
Well,
that's
yeah, true.
Luck. You didn't accidentally do that, did you?
I mean, we just think, well, there's plenty of people with bad luck. They do end up robbing and turn into a life of crime. Do you know what I mean? That's not an excuse, and I think the film kind of tries to sort of make that a bit more sympathetic. And it's just like, you know, again, we can just have a bad guys, and I think, you know, Sam Raimi just likes to make things a bit more like, you know, misty-eyed. You know, he's bit, you know, the Sandman. Yeah, you know, so some of it is really good. I mean, I think he's actually plays it really well, but he's just such a sad sack. He's just like, poor me. Oh well,
where was me?
And you know, I just like
I found these films exhausting come the end, because we had a mopey fucking Spider-Man in a relationship that seems to give neither of those twos any fucking pleasure whatsoever.
No, he's a bit of an emo Spider-Man as well, isn't he?
His mate is constantly fucking, you know, slapping him and getting pissed off with him, and then like the villain is like, and it's just like
Kevin the teenager.
God, there's just no fucking colour in this.
It is quite literally the darkest, you know, because a lot of it happens at night.
That's
and
true.
You kind of got the, you know, and it's of all the colour palettes, it's kind of this has obviously the more light and shade, obviously, because you kind of deal with Jekyll and Hyde as we see later on in the film. But yeah, literally this is probably like the least brightest of the three films.
I think the problem is because there are actually, you know, as I've said at the top of the show, there are good parts of it. I think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think, but and you can kind of tell that, because even though we've just sort of complained about how the character of Sandman is again a bit too mopey, but the actual action with Sandman is probably the best parts of the film. You actually sort of feel that come alive. You know, particularly, you know, the moments when he's actually being Sandman, is probably think, oh, this is too bad. And I remember like the first 30 minutes actually flow quite well. It's actually not quite, you know, I watched it a few days ago.
It wasn't an immediate disaster. No,
yeah, you're thinking like, actually, this is working all right so far. And but I know what's coming, and I know what's like, yeah, this is all going to fall apart. So it's all I'm just getting out my watch, thinking, right, when's it all going to come undone?
I have to say, so we were talking. I was talking to a listener of ours a couple of days ago, and he enjoyed the Spider-Man 2 review, but he said we talked about other things, but it got mentioned at one point, and he said that he thought it was a bit harsh, and I actually said to him that we felt it was harsh when we were recording it, because at the end of the film we're going, but we quite like it.
Actually, we
it's not
quite
bad,
liked
I promise.
it.
And it is that digging into the detail. I think with this one, I'm going to have a problem with almost every fucking scene. But we'll see as we go into it. Shall we discuss this film sequentially, folks?
Why not?
Yes, because we're like 40 minutes in, so we should.
Yeah. Well, this was what I was saying.
See if you can do it inside 2 hours.
The first scene of the film, I think, is the Broadway thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so we obviously have the main titles, which is all kind of like
Lazy.
Yeah, it's just kind of like recapping the first film again. But with
I was concerned though, because I not to make too much of it, but I'm reading all these 3-star reviews about reading between the lines. Had there been no other Spider-Man films, if that was possible, because obviously things have been set up before this film, it would be a 2-star film. When a series is like a 4 and 5-star series, and you get a bad installment, providing it's somewhat competent, it gets 3 stars in most places. And I went in, and as it started, and the familiar music breaks out, and you see the webbing, I immediately thought of 2 and the artwork at the start. And then I'm seeing still photos, and I'm thinking, this film's just got no... Almost that snap judgment of, I'm not sure this film's going to have really any heart.
I mean, yeah, your differences you see, like sort of the symbiote kind of go on the web. Really, that's about it.
Yeah.
So I'll go. But it starts with like, "Hey, me, it's Spider-Man." You know, this kind of like
super popular.
And yeah, so
he's getting blown by the residents of New York.
His life's like kind of like he's able to sort of like manage his life a bit better now. He's kind of enjoying life as Spider-Man, as he was at this time. And you sort of see Gwen. You get introduced to Gwen at lecture. You know, he's going to, so he's like kind of recapping Peter. He's having a better time of it now. Yeah, we go to see MJ. She's doing a Broadway thing. Harry's at the theatre looking a bit devious, as if sort of like sitting and like, ooh, I'm plotting something evil. Just you wait.
Wasn't he wearing a green bow tie as well?
I think he might be.
Film? Yeah, there's some foreshadowing in it.
There it is.
What made me... all I really want to say about this whole Mary Jane on Broadway thing is, how does a show get to opening night on Broadway before you realise, like, the main lady's shit? Because let's be honest, Kirsten Dunst...
we're quite surprised at the fact that, oh my god, she can sing.
Well,
you knew.
No, I would say quite the opposite. Kirsten Dunst's singing voice sounds like her speaking voice set to music.
Was that actually her, though? I think it was actually her, wasn't it? She wasn't dubbed or anything like that.
No, she wasn't dubbed. And I didn't actually think she was terrible, right? I mean, when I say it sounds like a speaking voice, I just mean it's not particularly special. But in universe, this is not a very good performance. Her voice isn't carrying and it gets bad reviews. And I'm thinking, how do you get that far to go on Broadway, which is one of the 2 most prestigious places to perform on stage in the world, and you're sacked after 1 night? And we do hear the replacement rehearsing a couple of days later, and she's like really good. It's just ill thought through.
So in the last film, right? She was a hit, wasn't she? Because
she was a model. She was a model.
I thought she was she was in plays, though, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was an aspiring actress, but the only time we saw evidence of her success was oh no, she was on stage because he didn't turn up. She was at the empty seat.
Yeah,
but that wasn't musical theatre, and we don't know if that was Broadway or off Broadway.
So there has been a difference, because that's one of the things I was like been a bit confused with, because she was like obviously sort of getting regular work, she was on billboards and things like that.
Yes.
And like.
But that's modelling. That was an advert for jewellery or whatever. And
okay. And this film kind of treats like this role as a big break, and now she's ruined. Do you know what I mean? It's just felt. Hang on. You were working before this. You were
I don't know how New York is set out in terms of its theatre life, because she's noted as being on Broadway this time. whereas before she was on stage in New York somewhere. But I don't know if that's Broadway. That could have been something else entirely. I've no real idea. But she's fired like immediately because that was her opening night. And I'm thinking, well, if it's a Broadway show, and you've got tourists from all over the world attending these things, you kind of surely work out if your leading lady's up to it or not before the opening night.
Yeah.
And because you've used Kirsten Dunst's real voice, which is serviceable, she's not a bad singer per se.
No, sounds
But
good.
I don't think she's a singer either.
Well, she did bring out that album. But I remember going to see
whatever,
this like with some
in
group
this
of friends,
film,
and we were like, "Wow, she can sing."
Yeah, but she's got like a pretty average singing voice, and later on we're going to see her replacement, who sounds like a professional singer. The gap between them in quality is quite marked. But anyway, Peter sat there looking fucking cheesily amazed and loving it, and repeating her lines and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah, so him and Harry having a encounter outside. He's like, he doesn't want to know. Then he goes back and meets MJ, and she's like, "What's going on between you guys?" And he says like, "What deceiving hatred Harry has for him." I don't know. It just seems a bit.
Those crazy guys.
Well, any subtlety in Jane Franco has gone. It's ludicrously over the top in this film.
Yeah, and we get a shot of he's using like the Green Goblin serum now, and
they should have done that before he was hearing voices in the last film. Plus, it undermines becoming old buddy, old pal at the end of the film as well. If this serum sends you fucking mental, how he suddenly sees sense later in the film doesn't really work for several reasons we'll get to.
How that happens is a doozy.
Oh, it's fucking awful. But again, it's just written with no heart. But we'll come to that. So then they go to the park, him and MJ, didn't he? And they lay in the bed.
They're lying on a web, watching the stars, and the symbiote
lands right next to his moped, which is handy.
Yeah.
The only superhero in the town, and you land right next to his.
It's like, I'll tell you what, it takes a sweet-ass fucking time to attach it to his suit, seeing it's like...
It really does.
It just hangs out in his apartment for a number of weeks.
I thought you were going to say hangs out his bum. I thought, oh...
Yeah, it doesn't even bother crawling anywhere else or anything, does it? It just sort of...
It just goes...
Just hangs there.
Yeah, it waits till Peter's having like a nightmare as well, which makes real sense. Okay, so
That's the noise it makes.
Flint Marko has escaped from prison. And
that lovely green t-shirt.
Yeah, that's comic accurate.
I was going to say, that's kind of like fairly... well, obviously it's I don't not read the comics, but I did a bit of research and oh yes, it's the same.
Yeah.
And he looks the part. He does look the part.
He does look the part. It took me by surprise, actually, because, as I say, I'd only really... Well, I've probably seen him in loads of stuff, but I could only remember him from Sideways. And he's a lot more bulked out in this film, as I recall. In Sideways, he's got kind of floppy hair, and he's a bit...
He wears it a bit longer, doesn't he? So
yeah, he's just... I don't know. I thought he was a slimmer build, but then I might be conflating him with Ben Mendelsohn. I've not seen that film for quite a few years.
I think this kind of role, is kind of quite... He needs to be sort of physically built up, doesn't he, I think?
He really is, though. But he goes to see his sick daughter, attached to machines.
Need to shoot.
She's got that movie illness where you look totally fine, but you're not very well.
Yeah.
They're never pale and vomiting constantly, are they?
No.
And he's caught by his... I don't know if it's his current wife or his ex-wife. That's Teresa. What's her surname? She was best known for a film with Deborah Winger called Black Widow. Hang on, let me look up Black Widow. That was mid-80s. She was naked in quite a lot of that film. Black Widow is... Hang on. Oh, that's her. I've just looked up Black Widow and it's brought up the wrong one. Sorry. Black Widow is 1987. And she is called Teresa Russell. I was quite surprised to see her because it's a really, really small role. And while she's not a superstar, she sort of flirted with being a leading lady for a period of time. And she sort of did these kind of erotic thrillers for a little while. Yeah. But yeah, her biggest role is probably Black Widow. which is not a bad film, but as the title suggests, it's like men dying and she was married to them and that sort of thing.
Yeah, basically the plot of Adam's Family Values.
I've not seen Adam's Family Values.
But it's basically that where, like, you know, Uncle Fester marries, like, Joan Cusack, who's like a black widow type.
Although I'm pretty sure she was wearing nipple clamps in one scene, and I don't imagine that was in Adam's Family Values, but
no.
There you go.
Should have been, though, but...
And she's furious with him, and he just looks so sad.
He does. I said it before, he's basically just sad sack, isn't he? He's just like, it's just like,
He says he was wrongly accused. We're going to see the flashback later, and that's a technicality. I know someone bumped into your fucking arm, but you were holding a gun at an old man, evidently with your finger on the trigger.
Mm.
I don't think you've got much of a defence here.
Hang on, so the police caught and arrested him a while ago.
And
they just escaped from prison, and they only sort of decide to tell Peter, and
they tell Peter 5 years later.
They've
only just cast someone to do it.
By the way, the guys escaped. We'll best tell them. What do you mean we never told them? Oh shit!
Why? He actually says, "Why are you only telling us this now?" And he doesn't get an answer. It's almost like we best question it. James Cromwell is in this film as Captain Stacy, Gwen's father. He's played by the comedian Dennis Leary in the next iteration. He's really wasted, considering that's James Cromwell. I can't believe how little he's in the film.
Yeah.
Again, it's just an overstuffed film. They haven't got enough room for him. They've tried to cast decent people everywhere, but so anyway, it's all about money with Marco. It couldn't happen in this country, because we don't have skyscrapers for Spider-Man to sort of swing between. But it's a bit like Breaking Bad. We don't have to pay for healthcare in the same way here. So that allows the plot of this film. So he was only trying to get money for his sixth daughter, Chris.
I know. Yeah, but obviously couldn't work for whatever reason.
No. Well, those machines are expensive, Chris. No,
he had bad luck. That's what it is.
That's bad luck.
It's just bad luck.
I was worried at this point, but the next scene in the film really fucking worried me. Peter going to see Aunt May to tell about proposing to MJ.
Yeah.
This scene goes on forever, and she tells a story that omits no detail. And it reminded me of Alan Partridge. You're laughing at weather, Flynn.
Well, the basis is like of Aunt May basically saying, well, only get married if you're ready. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay then. Well, here's my wedding ring.
Yeah. Here's the engagement ring he gave me, and here's the story about how it happened. And she just tells every fucking detail, and the story's going on, and you're like, did they at no point writing this scene think, Christ, this is a bit fucking boring?
Well, you got Tobey Maguire looking like really doughy-eyed at his aunt,
Oh, he's absolutely transfixed by this story, and at this point I'm thinking, do I prefer him like this? Because we complained last week, it's like, get your shit together, Pete. And now he's got his shit together, I'm thinking, I preferred him when he was a fucking mess. Because the constant cheesy grin in the first quarter of an hour of this film is mental. So, he heads back to his apartment, he's heading back on his moped, and basically he's attacked by... Well, it's meant to be a masked figure, but you've never seen a film if you don't know this is Harry. On a kind of skateboard version of the Goblin glider.
Yeah. And it's actually pretty good. I thought that, again, we're slagging the film off, but, the film at this point isn't, terrible. It's actually...
We've just had a terrible scene, but, that would be easily forgiven.
And, this actual sort of sequence is actually pretty decent.
I did think the effects haven't stood up that well. I think we've regressed a bit from last week. But, effects are going to age. That can't be helped to some degree. What did you think, Becca?
I remember going to see them. Obviously, at the time, it was probably like cutting edge, effects.
Yeah.
But now, many years on, obviously, it does kind of look a little bit jerky. But I was later on in the film, so sort of where we kind of see like Sandman sort of born, as it were. I thought those effects were okay. I mean, obviously, the video that I was watching, was I used the term grainy. No pun intended there. It was quite grainy, and also my screen resolution isn't that high, because it's only like a very mid-low range laptop, so I don't have the great 4K technology, unfortunately.
I mean, I guess.
But yeah, I was a bit disappointed by these really early visuals, sadly.
I thought the of course he.
So I'm gonna finish off one at my finger. Sorry.
He ends up getting knocked unconscious, which we'll come back to. But yeah, you're leading on to the bit where...
And also, it's been quite a good actually, but. It does end in a proper clang, clong, clong, and I almost expect to floating around the top of his head.
It's that early Simpsons episode where Homer falls down that gorge after trying to skateboard across it. That's what it is. Yeah, we go on to the birth of the Sandman. They're doing a science experiment in the middle of the night, which they don't follow up on at all. And a man gets into there.
Yeah, do you actually know what actually it is? It's...
No idea.
Something to do with sand.
Particle accelerator, it says on the materials I'm looking at now. But I love when they said it must be a bird, and the number of fat bird jokes that went through my head. I lost count, really. Must be a fat bird.
I like how these really trained scientists just sort of dismiss the slightest sort of...
It's probably a bird. Well, let's disintegrate the fucking thing then. They must know what this thing does. And surely that changes the conditions of the test. Science is quite exacting in the way it does things. So he gets disintegrated into the sand that this thing's whipping around to do what, we don't know. And he's deteriorated. And we come back to this scene in a bit, but let's jump to the sort of return to it. We see him sort of have to learn to reform into a human. In the early days of Blu-ray, this looked quite impressive.
I think as a concept, it's actually pretty decent as well. It's like it really does tell the story of someone trying to find. Or find a way back again. Trying to stand up, and it's actually quite sad and moving at times. There actually is a lot of thought, and this is like one of the things where the film's actually really good.
Yes,
but it's the other stuff after.
Well, between the two bits, we find Harry's in hospital. He's all right. He's lost his memory, and he'd do anything for his friends.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, the doctor's like, so he's fine. He's lost his memory, but he'll be fine. And he's like, and this is where he's full on Franco. He's like, my best friends.
I know. You weren't even like that before your dad died. I
die for them.
It's like you wouldn't have done before. You were a selfish rich kid. You kind of looked Pete, and you weren't that bad. But this is fucking silly, and it's I don't know, but amnesia plots are laziness generally, aren't they? Aren't they just normally lazy writing?
It's like trodden trope, really, isn't it?
Well, you need to postpone something for an hour. So how do you take them out of
lost of memory?
Danger from they've lost their memory for an hour. It will come back when you need it to.
It's kind of unnecessary as well. Do you think what time are you wasting here?
Well, exactly. You could be using that time better.
Because especially what Harry does later on, it's like, well, why aren't you just doing that from the get go?
Yeah, you could do it from the get go, or you.
It's very problematic. I think that's why this film is 2 hours 20 minutes, because they waste time faffing with things like this. Yeah,
they do. So we must be getting to the bit where he's sort of. Oh, that's the other thing. It's deliberate, but again, given Peter and Spider-Man are characters I'm not fond of. The film really irritates me when he becomes so self-absorbed in the first half an hour, because every conversation leads back to him and Spider-Man. She gets a distressing review, and he talks about how he's had about Spider-Man.
The thing is, I kind of felt bad for Peter here, because he's trying to be helpful. He's trying to be positive. To you know what? I get shit in the press too. You just got to rise above it, move on. And she's just throws it back in his face.
If Addie said, I get shit in the press too, and sort of positioned the conversation back towards her problem, I'd agree, because he's saying, look, I understand.
Yeah.
But it goes into quite a long bit on Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Because
he's meant to be getting arrogant here, isn't he?
I know. And 20 minutes earlier, we've just been shown a montage with a voiceover of how great his life is as Spider-Man. So to say, well, I have pains too with it, doesn't really work. But you're right to the degree that the film and the actress don't sell the level of sympathy with her that it's trying to. I think we should feel for her here a bit. But she's so... I mean, Mary Jane is a misery guts through all three films. And yes, she's got some challenges because she had a tough home life. She doesn't immediately make it in New York. She's been sacked from a big break. All of those things are valid. But there's not enough balance in it to justify why Peter wants her beyond the fact that she's traditionally a bit out of his league and he fancies her. I've never sold a real bond between these two. And 20 minutes of screen time or whatever it is after they finally admit they love each other, they're a bickering, depressed couple.
Yeah. You should really go for that really nervous Russian chick who makes you cookies.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
and
anyway,
again, they bring her back just to do nothing with.
Yeah. Yeah, they do something really odd with the landlord later on. But
so yeah.
So from here, you have the crane sequence where a crane goes out of control and Spider-Man saves Gwen. She's hanging off a building from a phone line.
She's basically midway through. This intelligent college girl is midway through a photo shoot where she's kind of going, "Here is my cleavage." I don't even know what the photo shoot's for. I don't know what they're promoting or anything.
The whole scene looks so weird. I couldn't get over it. I was thinking, this just looks bizarre.
She's by a window, leaning forward, showing her cleavage. But she's not indecently dressed particularly, but it's a moderately sexualized pose. And the photographer goes, "What's that in my shot?" Which he says before it comes anywhere near his shot. But it's a crane outside, and I'm thinking, you're photographing by that window. You would know that crane is there. This is just... It's not a big deal in the big scheme of things, but it's yet more, how lazy is this? How ill thought through is this? You just need Spider-Man to save Gwen Stacy. And after he does, that crane is still swinging around out of control. He just swings off, no problem.
It's basically just an excuse for Spider-Man to get a key of the city, and what better way is this to actually save the life of someone who who's related to someone with essentially
a bit of power in the city. I think he needs to save Gwen Stacy for the sort of jealousy with Mary Jane angle. This is not Gwen. This is Gwen Stacy in name only. I'm not an expert on that character. I'm not, but I know the basic arc. She precedes Mary Jane. She's kind of the high school sweetheart. She's a very different character from Mary Jane. But here, the only real similarity is she's got the name.
Got blonde hair.
She's got the same father, and she's got blonde hair. I mean, basically, the two leading ladies have reversed their natural hair colours because she's a natural redhead and Kirsten Dunst is a natural blonde. So yeah. But as long as the collars and cuffs match, as Becca loves.
So we get introduced to Eddie Brock. He, as you would do, as so-called girlfriend. We find out, isn't really his girlfriend. Is hanging off life. Position. He seems pretty calm, just taking photos and just sort of.
He's got bigger things on his mind at the moment, like the life of that woman who might be about to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he takes photos of him. It's like, yeah, Peter's photos make you look, fat or whatever. And
Yeah.
again, I don't know if we're supposed to smirk at that or just find him smarmy. I'm not quite sure what they're going for with the Brock character. Definitely, there's precedent for that he tries to muscle in on Peter's job. That's fairly comic book accurate, even if the character isn't. But I seem to remember him being something of a bodybuilder. But there you go.
So we go back at the Daily Bugle. I think it's the first time we see JJ, and he's taking pills, and he has the loudest buzzer for comic effect I've ever seen on cinematic film.
I think it works though.
I mean, it's one of those like movie things where like the buzzer's that loud, it actually vibrates the table.
Yeah, I don't think you could do this as literally in the Marvel universe.
No,
even though the Marvel universe is proud of its comic book origins and is quite happy to do the uniforms and all the rest of it, it is Marvel within our world to some degree. Heightened, changed, different, but I don't think you could do this exact version of the same character. Now I think about it and I watch these films again, they were wise to retool him a little bit. Brock and Parker are competing over a staff job, aren't they?
Yeah, that is basically just set up for that. It's like who can catch Spider-Man doing a in the act, so to be doing something.
That's what I want. And Brock is convinced he'll do it, because he knows he'll do it one way or another. Then what?
Yeah, so they're back with Peter and Harry, and they're talking about the old days, and they're playing balls as like they never did that before in their fucking lives.
Yeah, just a completely different energy than their relationship ever had. And he doesn't know anything, but he kind of knows he knows. It's not clear what he knows because the film doesn't know what he knows. The film hasn't thought about it. They just need him to have amnesia for a bit, and it needs, I think, to resell us how friendly they are, so that when he turns again a bit later on, we're supposed to find that a bit heartbreaking, which doesn't really work.
No. We did this where we find MJ loses the role.
Again, how does this all work? She walks in, and there's a rehearsal going on with her replacement, and you're like, don't they let you know if you work on Broadway?
No, they do. Oh shit, we thought he told her, or like she's supposed to
Oh, right,
so it's just like a shitty kind of management of it.
Right, she's fired anyway.
Yeah, and then she's like, obviously Spider-Man's getting a lot of attention.
There's a ceremony for key to the city, sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's just a bit where like he's a bit of a dickhead, isn't he? He kind of like kisses Gwen upside down.
Upside down. Yeah, and I just think like the fact that he's oblivious to why that upsets her. I may not love the Mary Jane character in these films, and I do think they've gone way too like melancholic on her across the three films. But she's right here. She is absolutely in the right here. He swings on like a twat, flirts with her, lets her kiss him in what was a very special moment between those two, in an echo of that. And when she says that was our thing, he doesn't even remotely get it.
Like, the odd thing is though, he hasn't got the symbiote on him yet. Now, if they did if they established the symbiote got on his suit by this point or on him, whatever,
and he's just starting,
and just slowly kind of getting a bit,
he's still a good guy at this point, but that was a bit out of character, that sort of thing.
Yeah. That would make sense, wouldn't it? But
no, it's just gone completely to his head.
So it's almost like he doesn't need a symbiote to be a dick. That's the problem. It's like the symbiote's kind of like irrelevant, really.
He's insufferable. He's insufferably happy, and then he's insufferably like lacking in any empathy. And if you're gonna kiss another woman, which I don't recommend, don't do it in front of your fucking girlfriend.
Yeah. Anyway, so
I think we've got the Sandman bit now.
Yeah. So Sandman just sort of like just comes along, gets hides from the cops, and then he has the first sort of fight with him. And we sort of, oh, where do these guys come from? Yeah, that's 15 minutes in.
Really? We're
yeah.
that far in. What did you think of this so far, Becca? We've had 50 minutes to get to this.
Yeah, it just drags. It really just drags, really, to be honest. I do struggle. I mean, like this, there are some really in this film. There are some really meaningful character notes, especially stuff with Aunt May, for example. But it's just wind it in. It needs to kind of like have better editing, really. I kind of feel that this sort of film, obviously, Sam Raimi is a very talented director. Obviously, he's very capable, as we all know from his amazing body of work. But I kind of get the impression, with this film, that obviously, ultimately, he wasn't happy with it, and I think he hoped through with the fourth, fifth, and sixth plan films that he had in mind, that would kind of make up for this. But I kind of feel like this film kind of kept getting away from him a little bit. That's the impression that I get, anyway. Even though he wrote the script. But yeah, I just kind of feel this is one of the many scenes where it just kind of got away from him a little bit. So in a word,
I think we know from experience that who's named as writing the script and what actually happened isn't always.
They're not always the same thing, are they? So.
He's clearly had involvement to be credited, but there were strong rumours of studio interference here. So I tend to think the Sandman bit is the bit he wanted to do, but of course it's competing for space with a load of other stuff. The one bit that was quite good is they used an amputee to play Spider-Man punching through him.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's an amputee. At the point where you see the shot with the arm right through him, where the sort of arm is in contact with the Sandman's stomach is where the guy's arm actually ends.
Mm-hmm.
Just for that shot.
Oh, okay.
No, it's interesting. It's just kind of to get that sound, really, wasn't it? So I think for that role, that kind of role as well, he went to kind of do a lot of research with people who had amputations and things like that, for example.
Yeah.
But for physical impairments as well. But yeah, I think I remember reading the same sort of thing. It was just to kind of get that sound effect and how that would work. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
But
go on, Chris. Sorry.
I was going to say, the question I really want to know, Becca, is what would you do to a proposal while someone's sticking a wedding ring in a champagne glass? Would you really find that really romantic?
It's quite awkward, isn't it? Yeah, it's quite awkward. Maybe use your tongue.
That's good advice for us all.
Sorry, that's really bad taste. I do apologise. Or you'd have to get some kind of implement, wouldn't you? I think.
I mean, obviously characters.
Or if you've got use of your mouth, do use other means. This is kind of straying into bad taste territory, so I'm going to step out.
Obviously, he's trying too hard.
Pour the liquid out.
Oh, yeah, this is like the third Bruce Campbell cameo as the maitre d'.
Is he kind of channeling? I got a really Basil Fawlty vibe.
This was probably yeah. The only difference is Basil disdained all his fucking guests. This guy is actually trying to help.
No, he's very lovely.
He wants to make it special.
Just John Cleese vibe generally. I think probably more the waiter from the Mr. Creosote sketch rather than Basil Fawlty. But just a general John Cleese vibe.
This is my favourite of the three Bruce Campbell cameos.
Yeah, it's mine as well. I would probably say he's always cool. He's always groovy in whatever he does. This is probably my favourite of the
and again,
Bruce trilogy.
There's no hard and fast rules. Yeah, perhaps he can get a trilogy box set.
Victor Twardowski box set is the Bruce trilogy.
The Bruce trilogy.
He is the Victor Twardowski of the series.
Jaws fans would buy that by mistake, wouldn't they? I think there are no.
The films have been on ITV. I've still not seen the Jaws sequels. I must see them at some point.
You haven't seen Jaws, have you?
They're there.
We'll get to it. It's on the list.
We'll start a Patreon.
Yeah, we are covering Jaws. You're going to have a shock at the drop in quality in that series. I mean, by Jaws 4, you think this is the same series as.
I was like, this is amazing.
This time it's personal.
Jaws 4 this time.
Yeah, there's a vengeful shark that roars in the fourth film, and it's a Christmas film.
Oh God.
Yeah. So. There are no hard and fast rules because we're complaining about the film wasting time and trying to cram too much in. This whole scene's a bit of a waste of time, but I have to say I enjoy it.
I just can't believe his ineptitude of it, of not reading the scene. I would never dream of doing the whole cheesy ring in the glass, because what if she chokes on it? What if, like, as what happens is she's not really feeling it, or there's a bit of a hostile. You know what I mean? It's like, you have to kind of pick your moment here, don't you? You kind of have to, like, have to have your back out.
She's had a terrible review. You've
like,
already spoken to her about, and
said,
you thought that was the night to do it.
Or what if she simply said, like, some champagne? She goes, actually, no, I don't really fancy champagne. I just want, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, then you're fucked, aren't you? Like,
yeah. And he's hired, like, violinists and things like that. It's meant well, but it's just as soon as she's having a bad day, he has no empathy for it. And we're supposed to believe he loves her. And I'm trying to think what film that was said in. He's not in. I think it was an episode of Frasier, actually, where he was talking to Niles, and he says, "You weren't in love with her, you were in love at her." And I think that applies to Peter. This is not a couple in love. This is a man infatuated. And when it comes to, like, her not matching the image of the infatuation, which is basically a model, and she's actually going through real life shit, he can't connect with that at all. And consequently, the scene is tone deaf because she's basically been a misery for 3 films. She's, with good reason, but they've chosen to write these obstacles for her all the way through. Her behaviour in the second film, like pissing about with that astronaut, messing with him completely. You kind of think, well, I'm not really on your side, but at this point, you're in the right. And he's so tone deaf, I'm not on his side either. So I'm sat watching this pair, and again, I'll refer to what I said in the last film. The pair of them just need to fucking grow up and learn a bit about, like, being there for other people. So that's it. She walks out, doesn't she?
Yeah, Gwen walks in and is like, oh, by the way, it's my college lab partner.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Which sends her over the edge. She's like, oh, you didn't even, like...
You saved her, you kissed her, you work with her, and I've never heard of her.
Yeah.
Not even in passing. Not even just, oh yeah, it wasn't a bad day, I had to do experiments. They partnered me up with,
Yeah.
It is suspicious. If you're hanging out with, like, a super hot lady, and you never mention her, that's suspicious. Yeah. Doesn't mean he's...
And she's all super friendly as well. Like, oh,
And she kissed him upside down. She will recognise her as the person who did that. So she's infatuated with a superhero who she doesn't know is Peter, but MJ does. So she's now seeing a woman who's fairly hot, who's kind of close to both sides.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So. Yeah, next we have the police commissioner finally telling them, like, oh, by the way,
this thing that happened 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Bollocks, isn't it?
And
it's actually this guy. How do you know that? Well, he was in prison for it. What?
Don't say.
Like, why link this to Ben? It's ludicrous. Couldn't he have just shot someone else?
Yeah.
All right, okay. So Peter's furious, and what makes me laugh is the writers were smart enough to have Peter ask the question the audience is asking. Why are you telling me this now? And then not answer it.
Well, you got to get to him listening to radios on being all vengeful and shit.
Now he's it's time for the symbiote to come out from under the bed after a week.
Yes.
He's having a nightmare, which the symbiote seems to sense.
Yeah, MJ seems like forgiving him a little bit because, like, oh, sorry to hear about the uncle stuff. So the symbiote attached to a suit.
That exact scene, not the scene of it. It's in the. He wakes up in the cartoon, hanging upside down, looking at his reflection in a building. It's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem any different, does it? I don't think it looks broadly similar.
Yeah, I think they've been a bit underwhelming on the design of the suit because it is just his regular suit in all black.
Yeah, it seems. I mean, there is kind of meant to be an almost like mirror image. I mean, you sort of compare it with the Tom Hardy version, which to me seems a lot more like go back to the comics. I guess it's a lot more certainly stylized. But I think with this iteration, I think it is basically kind of like a sort of other kind of sort of mirror image, as it were. So it's kind of meant to look similar, very similar to the costume, but obviously slight tweaks here and there.
Do they actually establish any sort of difference in ability? Because the thing with the suit was it kind of like added more.
It gives him emo powers with the emo hairdo.
In the cartoon, because it's the cartoons are not even going for subtleness, so they will try to mimic the internal voice of the comic. So they will literally have him say, "Wow, my webs are just coming out by themselves, and I feel so much stronger, and this is cool." And
it's one of the downsides of the cartoon. Actually, it's
I don't really see.
It's a bit too much like just stating everything.
Yeah, but it's aimed at a different audience.
Yeah.
I mean, having said that, something like Batman the animated series largely managed to layer those things better. Not always. There's a couple of cheesy episodes of that. But in the story beats, I just thought it was just more logically set out. That's all. We don't establish a great. I mean, there's a bit in the cartoon where he's attacked by police. It must have been the faking of the crime again, and he's being like police and that are trying to subdue them, and he's getting a bit heavy-handed back, and you hear him say to himself, "What am I doing?" And then the sort of symbiote clearly must assert itself, and he goes, "Defending myself." And that's difficult to do in live action, but I don't think the film really does it, because all of the sort of supposedly evil things he does aren't that evil. And as Peter Parker, he becomes a bit of an asshole, but he already kind of was. He just becomes a different flavour of asshole with eyeliner and darker hair. Brushing your hair forward, and he's just insufferable, but
looking
I
even
kind of
more
thought
like a dick.
But he was anyway. So then what?
He shows it to Kirk Connors. He sort of advises, "Don't get any of that on you." And
I love the way he goes. He says something like, "I'm a physicist, not a chemist or a biologist," or something like that. And I'm thinking, so basically you're just telling us in the audience that you're only here because you're the only scientist in this series the audience has heard of, but this is not your specialism at all.
My next gym, not this, not why.
I teach English, but I suppose I'm a teacher. Yeah, he says it's not of this earth. Don't get any on you.
And then we have another fight with Sandman. He kind of finds Sandman and basically kicks the shit out of him with the black suit. He washes him away.
The most ridiculous thing annoyed me here. There's a bank. No, it's the fact that a bank is being robbed, and the Sandman can disintegrate, so he disappears down like a drain with massive, great fat bags of money. That doesn't work.
No.
The money would just be sat on the top of the fucking thing. But anyway, Peter follows down after him. Brock's there to try and take photos. He doesn't let him, and then he takes a load of photos anyway of just the sort of area. So it's a telegraphing. We know what's going to happen. He's going to fake a photo. And he chases after him. Looks a little bit like in the reboot, in the sort of sewers with the lizard.
Yeah.
It's an okay fight, but he's getting angrier. There's a little bit of, did you show my... But the trouble is, it's that voice. He's, did you show my Uncle Ben mercy? But he sounds such a whiner. But, yeah, he basically defeats Sandman by getting him soaking wet, doesn't he?
He flushes him away.
Could have just pissed on him at the start, saved a bit of time.
And then he gets back. He shouts at his landlord.
That's so out of character, Chris.
I know. It's not like Peter to sort of. It's not like Peter to actually stand up for yourself.
Mind you, it's making the landlord's daughter wet. She's all right with it.
But
look how assertive he is.
Here's the thing with the landlord, right? This is meant to be like, Peter's cross like, but landlord like instantly fucking changes and goes like, oh well, I'll respect Peter now. And he shouted at me once. Oh well, I'm gonna sort of be extra nice to him and not and not pester him for my rent, which he rightly owes me. But do you know what I mean? It sends an odd message. It's weird. I don't get it.
You never get the impression he's going to be evicted. I mean, I was watching The Graduate a couple of days ago. I haven't seen that for a few years now. I love that film. But the funny thing is, I fell in love with it on such an early viewing of it that I don't ever really know it as well as I think I do. Most films I know, I just know. But every time I watch that film, there's quite a bit I've forgotten, and I don't watch it that often. But there's a bit where he sort of goes to Berkeley, I think it is, to sort of chase after the daughter, Elaine, isn't it? Elaine Robinson. And he's renting a room there, and the landlord just wants him out because he thinks he's morally bankrupt because he overhears certain rows and that. And every time I saw that landlord, and it was only a couple of times, I was like, oh God, the landlord's caught up with him because he's going to be kicked out. I never get that from this guy at all. And I don't see the point of these sequences. But I don't see the point of the fucking landlord, to be honest. I know. And the daughter, I mean, what's the daughter even there for? Because all it does is muddy the waters, because I think we're all kind of agreeing she's a better match. So, yeah, he looks in the mirror, he notices his personality's being, altered. And then he goes to Aunt May and says, Spider-Man killed him! And I'm like...
Why are you telling her this?
Why are you telling her that?
She's Spider-Man. That's not Spider-Man. So, yeah, Harry and MJ. Harry invites Mary Jane
round for some chubby checker
to play, to do
that's
the,
not
so,
a euphemism.
to dance to the twist.
And then suddenly it's like, ooh, you still have some chemistry.
Yes.
Actually, the way her relationship is with Pete and the chemistry they've clearly got there, there's a half a chance he could have got her without all the threats.
Yeah.
And if he had to threaten her, then don't show that kind of chemistry, because again it muddies the water around Mary Jane. A couple of bad weeks with your bloke, and suddenly you're looking elsewhere. I don't like any of this really.
But it does actually feel if it seems more organic than the stuff with Peter.
They actually play it quite well, and yeah, they've got more chemistry than the other two.
But anyway, so yeah, they have a kiss, and he gets a bit of flashback, doesn't he? He suddenly remembers everything.
Yeah.
And
as soon as she goes home, he turns up and
yeah, he attacks MJ as the Goblin straight away, and then MJ calls Peter and just sort of breaks up with him.
Yeah, it takes him somewhere picturesque to do it, and says she's got someone else. And then Peter meets Harry in like a cafe,
in a diner type place,
and he's like, "I'm the other man."
Sorry, Peter, you ought to know. And then he runs up all upset, and he's like enjoying his pie.
Yeah,
and then,
it reminded me of Taste of Strawberries. I wouldn't know. I would.
Yeah.
It's very sort of like he could have mimed licking vagina out at this point, and it wouldn't have been any sleazier.
Yes, it's really
it's horrible.
But it's just an odd thing because, like, you know, he kind of like turns like when he's outside, looks at it, and Harry just looks and just winks at him in a really kind of like, you know, kind of odd way, and then just disappears. Like, it's just such an odd thing to do.
Yeah, you're not Batman. Because Batman is like has mastered that early in his career. When we get like someone look away and when they look back he's gone, we just accept that's his skill set, even if it might be improbable given where he was stood. Harry doing it is really odd. I don't know why they decided to put that in. He's not an illusionist. And
then they have a fight. Basically, they go back to Harry's place and they have a fight. They're basically, yeah. So all this is like pretty much wrapped up and done. They pretty much just like, right, okay, and then.
Yeah, all of this, from the moment they're dancing to the twist to the whole thing being fucking over, is like a couple of minutes, it feels like. A bit more than that, but not much.
Yeah, so this is where he goes full on dark, isn't he? He goes full
Your dad
on...
hated you. Like, they're arguing about dads? Really?
And yeah,
Well,
they have a fight, and he uses the pumpkin thing to sort of like blow him up.
yeah, when he throws it at Peter, Peter dodges it, webs it, and slings it back at him.
Mm.
And the bomb goes off, and Peter leaves. At this point, we might believe Harry to be dead.
Yeah.
He's clearly not, if you've ever seen a film, but it's possible at this point. And then the Bugle cover comes out with the picture of Spider-Man in the black suit with money from the bank. So Eddie Brock has taken a photo of Spider-Man, ostensibly of Spider-Man stealing money, which we know didn't happen. He's taken a regular photo of Spider-Man that Peter did with Spider-Man in the regular suit and just doctored it. Brock is on staff, and Peter turns up and sort of threatens him. Dialogue's nuts because he said, what was it he says? He says something like, have mercy, and he said, if you want forgiveness, and he didn't ask for that. What are you talking about? Did they not read back what they'd written?
Yeah, it doesn't sound right, does it?
No.
But to be fair, it's the only time that Peter actually has any balls where he just goes, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to stand up for myself and show you up.
And this is meant to be more evidence that Peter's gone really dark. But what he's done here...
It's justified, isn't it?
Is absolutely justified. Pushing him against the wall, possibly a step too far, because that's technically assault, I suppose. But he didn't go in and beat him up or anything. He went in, just pinned him slightly and said, that's not appropriate. And then he turns to Robbie
Robertson fess up,
and
or
says,
I'm going to fuck it, and then...
check these photos.
Yeah.
And later they check that they've been doctored. They go to wherever it is, and they've confirmed these are doctors. I don't know how easy that is to do. I don't know, but they do.
He says check your sources next time.
Yeah. And then we come to the infamous part of the film, which is the dancing.
Peter.
First, he goes into a store that has a sale on and walks out in a suit.
Yes, he's just got a staff job, so he's got money now. So he's there dancing, and it's meant to be kind of like, yeah, I'm really cool, and everyone's just looking at him like he's the biggest dick in the world.
I would, of all the scenes in this film, this is the one I would like to have a conversation with Sam Raimi about, a completely open-minded one, where I would say, what were you going for? Because I tend to think he knows Peter's a nerd. So I think he's gone for a nerd trying to be cool, and it's to be kind of humorous, but it's more irritating than funny. It's meant to be more evidence that Peter's becoming evil, but it doesn't kind of play like that. It just becomes he's a twat, and a twat isn't necessarily evil. So it sort of falls between several stools. What did you think, Becca?
I despair. I really despair. It was.
What were they going for? What do you think they were going for? What were they trying to tell us?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think by this point of the film, I think it got to literally the last half hour, little pockets here and there, but I lost the will to live. Really, I was like, oh my god, get on with it.
I was struggling with this.
I'm going to be honest. I was kind of. Obviously, there are really pockets of this film. I'm just going to speak in generalities. I did enjoy parts of this film. There are some good visual elements, but I did struggle quite badly with tonight's viewing. I do apologise. This is going to come out really poorly. So if any of you listeners out there who have a burning love for this film, I do apologise.
There must be some people out there who must love this film.
Like those people who like Dino, there must. There's nothing wrong with it.
There's a lot wrong with it.
But oh yes, this is my favourite of the series. I'm sure there is. That's fine. But yeah, I just kind of feel a little bit like, oh. But I did struggle this evening. I do apologise.
We're going to have listeners now who were still children when this came out.
Oh, this is it.
So because it's 13 years ago.
I wasn't long out of uni, so.
If you watch this at 12, you're 25 now. There's every chance that you've got a bit of nostalgia for this film. I don't think we're going to offend anyone because I just think this is in pop culture so solidly as not a very good film.
No, I think a lot of it now is also it's become a huge part of meme culture as well, isn't it? Because there's a lot of sort of visual facial memes come out of Tobey Maguire alone.
Yeah,
sort of facial expressions that he makes throughout this film is just a whole
But I
meme
think-
on its own.
I think no one who loves this film is going to come to any review being surprised when it gets talked ill of.
Yeah, it's
So
to
I
be
would
expected.
I would
but
be kind
yeah,
of
this particular
disappointed in any listener that got like really pissed off or angry, because what do you expect? But there are worse films out there than this. It's
Yeah,
just
definitely.
it's just a mess, and in a lot of scenes, I don't really know what they're going for. From scene to scene, it kind of looks like a Spider-Man film, and I had a lot of problems with the other two. So, you know, it's not like when you bang in Superman 4 and immediately go, what the fuck happened to the budget? You know, or you watch Batman and Robin and sort of go, what are they doing?
Metropolis turns into Milton Keynes, yeah.
Watch any
Yeah, literally.
watch any 2-minute part of this film, and it looks fairly in keeping, with a couple of exceptions where you go, that scene would never have made it into an earlier one. But, you know, there you go. Where do we go from here? The Sandman reforming, and I was really struggling by this point. Becca's just hit on it, that it's dragging. And I wasn't finding this character engaging, and he was so fucking mopey that when he reformed, I was like, oh, he's back. I was hoping this bit was going to be largely Venom, and we were going to do the story some justice. And yes, the film will have been overstuffed, but it will make up for it a little bit.
But the odd thing
I was really disappointed when it came back.
It's been 30 minutes since we last saw him, so what the fuck's happened since then? Like, 30 minutes into the film, like, days of stuff has happened since, you know, Spider-Man's supposedly washed him away.
The film just parks things until it needs it, and then brings back. That's what Harry's Amnesia was about. We don't know what to. We want him early in the film as an action sequence because he was turning evil at the end of the previous film. That didn't make sense, but go to the previous episode to see why we thought that, and we all kind of agreed with that as well. But then they've got nothing to do with him as evil for like over an hour. But if he's that vengeful, he's going to keep going at Spider-Man. So let's knock him out and have him have amnesia. And it's the same here. It's the same. They didn't know what to do with him for a while, so they just ignored him for half an hour. It's the same with Venom. The symbiote has to land and go home, and you've identified as him having a nice evening with Mary Jane before all the trouble starts as the best point. But then you've got no role with him for a little while. I'm with Chris. I think he should have had the symbiote suit on almost straight away and been starting that arc of being a bit of a dick rather than turning in 2 minutes flat. But the film hasn't gone that way, so it's got no point. So it hangs out in his room for days, which is just odd because our understanding of most sort of symbiotes is of any kind in nature is they need kind of a host. They don't sort of live disconnected from things for very long. So it's not very well thought through.
And that's just it. You know, it could have had, it could have been mostly been between Harry, you know, all the way through, and then him basically sort of nearly killing him as like the full on, I've got all the way now.
We are trying to explain why this film isn't working rather than just rag on it because it's Spider-Man 3 with Spider-Man 3's reputation. And a lot of it is structural. There are problems with details. There's bits in this film that are almost Orsi and Kurtzman-like in that they just wave something away and then strangely try to over-explain certain things. We'll get to it later with the butler. Chris will know, you'll both know exactly what I'm on about. That's almost lazy. That's kind of shit. We've got to wrap this up, and it's just there's nothing in it that's like visually as wrong as like Superman 4, Batman and Robin, or anything like that. There's nothing that looks as unfinished as something like X-Men Origins Wolverine, where the effects weren't done. This is all like competently assembled, but the constituent parts are just badly put together. It looks like it was written by committee. They don't know what to do with certain characters. They get to certain points in the runtime and they have to quickly wrap something up. And we're supposed to care about characters that have never been in any way particularly that interesting or likable. And the Sandman's a good example. Thomas Hayden Church does a good job with what he's given, and he looks like he's stepped out of the pages of a comic, but Christ, what a mope. When he came back, I remember being actively disappointed because I thought we were moving on to Venom soon. We're at a point. How far in the film are we at this point? Venom hasn't even appeared yet. I know the symbiote is there.
Venom's literally probably in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, because Venom is only Venom once he's with Brock, if you like. Venom is still effectively Spider-Man.
Well, you pretty much have like it's this, and you have like the jazz club scene where he takes Gwen on a date to win MJ back and does all the dancing. That weird
he's a
dancing
wanker
shit.
in that scene.
And it's from that scene where like he gets in a fight with the barman at the end, and he hits MJ. That to him he goes, "Oh no, this suit's changed me. I need to get it off."
There was a bit of a backlash to this scene, but the way it played to me, he was a dickhead because he turned up, flirted with like the waitress. I don't know what. This is why I'd love to talk to Sam Raimi about it, because the waitress responds to him like she's almost attracted to him, and it's like, is the film trying to make him cool, or is the film trying to make him feel cool? And the world just looks at him like, what the fuck's he doing? And it tries to have it both ways in different scenes. Him taking Gwen there is a real dick move anyway. So, yes, the suit is corrupting him. But the actual point where he hit her played like an accident to me. He didn't look at her, size her up and hit her. He just kind of turned. He didn't know she was there. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
But whatever. I can understand why he wants the symbiote off him after this. But yeah, he's not suddenly a wife beater. He isn't.
Yeah.
But he goes to the church. Now, I don't know. I'm confused by this. I'm pretty sure in comic books and cartoons we established fairly early on the symbiote can't handle loud noises. Why you'd want to hang around in New York, I'm not sure. But he can't handle loud noises. Now, at this point,
it's like vibrations, isn't it? It's like that kind of like.
It is noise, but it's noise. It's noise with a certain frequency. You get the impression. So I don't think it's necessarily car horns or whatever, because you'd be fucked in New York if it was. But we've not established this at this point. So what he's doing in sort of the belfry of a church, I haven't got a clue. He's trying to rip
it's
the
just
suit
kind of
off.
like, oh yes, this is working, and he's kind of. It's weird because like for that tiny thing, it just looks like a regular suit, and now it's almost like the actual Venom sort of symbiote, isn't it? It's weird. It's kind of
I mean, we've seen him take the hood off it, because throughout the Tobey Maguire era and Andrew Garfield to a degree, I think they seemed to panic anytime he was in the full outfit and kept having him to take it off to show us his face, which is not a pretty face, to be fair. I'd rather they hadn't bothered. But he took the hood off, and I remember thinking, the mask. And I remember thinking, that's now disconnected from the rest of the symbiote. How does that even work? So it doesn't work. But yeah, the symbiote, he finds out, starts coming loose when he knocks into the bell. But he didn't know that, and it's just coincidence he's at a church.
Yeah.
And Peter's there, and Eddie's there in the right church because Peter told him to get religion. It's just a bit lazy, again.
Yeah.
But he manages to get this off, and it drops onto Eddie incredibly slowly, and he just stands there and let it happen. Turns into Venom, roars at the camera. Peter's up in the bell tower naked. Just go get him. It's done.
Actually, doesn't explain how he actually managed to get back down.
He swung home naked.
Oh,
What's that? You know. Imagine looking up and seeing them, his bollocks swinging around.
Yeah, so he obviously gives the ring back to May. May says no, keep it, and then literally you have Venom meets Sandman. He's like, how about we team up and kidnap MJ also immediately, and
that's it. We're straight into
the last secret now.
Which is awful.
The thing that sort of really, I don't know about you guys. I don't know how Becca feels about how this kind of just shows how lazy and just how cringe making this whole final scene. I hate one of the things I really do hate in films or TV or whatever is the kind of need to announcing everything that's happening on screen. So like, they
You
have
can see it.
the news reporter, and I feel kind of bad because the actress who actually played her actually
Lucy
committed
Gordon.
suicide a few years back.
She was literally like a day or two from her birthday. I'm trying to. I think it
Yeah,
would
that
have
was
been.
really sad.
I think
Yeah.
it would have been her 29th.
Yeah.
So
Oh
she
my
was about.
gosh.
So
That's
this
such a
was
shame.
this was 2 years before. So filming this, it's likely she was just turning 26, something like that. But she was dead in under 3 years from filming, and in about 2 years from release. Lucy Gordon, she died. British actress, as you can tell by the voice. I think she had some kind of romantic issues. She died 2 days before her 29th birthday
So sad.
in Paris, France. She hung herself.
So I do feel bad because, and I will say, it's not her. It's just how this is
Although
used.
her
Yeah,
accent,
it's not her fault, definitely.
No,
But yeah, it's
but
it's,
I
it's
will
that
say
sort of
her
this kind
accent
of
jars.
how they do it is a bit of a cliche. But yeah, it's very sad.
It's yeah, but
It's not her fault.
No, I just can't. I just cannot stand when when films decide to announce everything. It's like, oh, we're seeing here and Spider-Man out of nowhere. This is just brutal. This
Yeah, it's
could
a bit of a
be
lazy
the end.
tropism.
The
It's
final
just
moments. It's hard to imagine the.
yeah.
Her voice does jar, not because she's got a bad voice, but an English accent popping up here was odd. But Spider-Man swings in, runs in front of the flag while everyone wanks themselves silly. But literally, as he swings in, one of the mothers that's there, and in all of the Raimi films, New York stands and watches as this really dangerous stuff happens in front of them. But a mother literally says, yay, as he spies. It's the worst expression of joy since
Yay.
Yippee in The Phantom Menace. Yay. And there was some kid at some point when something happens where they went, wow, super cool.
Literally.
And I'm just thinking this is a direction from a very, very out of touch man at this point. Or they've just said, say whatever you like, and whatever they've said they've put in. I hate this sequence.
Yeah.
Sandman is not really a thing in it early on, but he becomes a thing, and it seems he can get bigger as he draws sand in, and they're on a construction site. Mary Jane's been abducted again.
She has
I think it was originally going to
worse
be
luck
Gwen.
in this
I
film.
think,
Oh my gosh.
initially.
I don't know why they suddenly. It seems to be because Venom is now Eddie. He has knowledge of having been bonded to Peter, so he knows Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Everything out of his mouth, and it isn't a lot, is really creepy here. My spider sense is tingling. If you know what I'm talking about, he may as well have thrust his crotch.
That's really cringy.
He might as well have thrust his crotch as he said it.
Yeah.
His teeth are always distorted when he's in the suit, which is
Yeah,
odd.
so he has to wear these weird
'Cause
fangs, doesn't he?
But it isn't when he's out of the suit. There's a bit where, because he steals her by pretending to be a taxi driver, and his teeth are normal then, so that
It's a
doesn't
bit
make.
weird.
And I don't know what I want to say about this scene. The mask is on and off every 2 minutes. He's getting the shit kicked out of him, but at the same time, a very pissed off Harry is in his apartment, and the butler comes over and says, I dressed his wounds. He killed himself by his own hand. You think, first off, there's no way you could know that, because that sort of isn't what happened anyway. Secondly, you're a fucking, pathologist now? You're paid to serve drinks and, iron shirts. And
Why are you telling him this now?
Right, yeah, and this guy has been consumed by pain and vengeance for 5 years? If this is in real time, if it's not in real time, it's been a couple of years. It's just nuts, and it's just I keep saying this word, lazy. And then he swings in, and he's suddenly old buddy, old pal. He's suddenly his best mate again, and it's like, okay, you've just been corrected, but you were twisted by a serum, which sent your father mad. None of this makes any sense, and
No.
you just get the impression they're all like, oh, whatever.
Yeah. So yeah,
It's just-
Venom ends up killing. They end up sort of dealing with Sandman. Venom ends up
time.
killing Harry.
How do they really deal with Sandman? He's an issue, and then he suddenly isn't, and then he's back and
I
hurt.
think he sort of like I think Harry
Bombs him,
bombs him, and he just sort of like
gives up. I don't know.
He just kind of like falls at the bottom, and he's kind of
but
like done till afterwards.
he'll be fine in a minute.
Yeah.
Whatever. Venom is dealt with nice and easily by the power of noise, but Harry is killed because he jumps in front of his bestest ever pal.
Yeah, he dies the same way his dad does. I mean, I kept expecting that scene for Spider-Man to sort of like drop Harry off at his place and the butler to walk in and vow vengeance.
Yeah, and then in the next film, the butler's dry cleaner says, I dressed his wounds, and he was killed by his own hand.
Yeah.
How does that work? You're speared by a glider. There's no evidence of how that happened. Oh, he did it to himself. What is there? What you can prove he thrusted that? What? Oh, this is shit.
Well, it's simple. He watched the first film, didn't he?
And then Peter does the meme-worthy cry. All the memes of him crying, and this is where he really looks like a Harry Enfield character. Fucking awful.
Yeah.
That's a great sound effect right there.
Yeah, it's kind of because he's
I can
almost
get in the trailer.
looks like he's blowing a raspberry or something.
He does a little bit as if he's going to go.
Awful, and it's such a close-up as well. It's like we got it. He's crying. He's the ugliest crier in the world.
This is like the very definition of ugly crying. Oh my god.
Yeah, he should have snot running down his nose as well.
But it's given us lots of memes, so we're grateful.
Yeah, and this guy behind him looks really fake. And at the same time, J. Jonah Jameson pays a kid $100 for a camera with no film in it.
Isn't that like Sam Raimi's daughter or something like that?
Yeah, I think they were.
I think it might be, you know.
Yeah.
He likes to have his family and relatives in his films. So I think, I kind of think that's his daughter, so which is very cute.
So then...
and she's quite smart, so...
If Marco reforms on her, he's fine. But he just decided not to continue fighting. And he tells Peter he's not a bad guy, really. Peter immediately forgives him. And
then he just drifts away, and then...
Drifts away with no further consequences.
So we don't know what happens to his daughter. Nothing. Doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter. He hasn't got away with any money at this point.
No.
So we don't care. Teresa Russell, who's not a superstar, but was a name, was completely wasted. The heartstrings of the daughter led to nothing. Righting the wrong of the fact he's escaped from prison, no problem there. The symbiote is destroyed, but Eddie, after 2 minutes in the suit, Eddie couldn't live without it and died trying to jump back into it. How long's he been wearing the suit? Literally, it must be a few hours. Peter's fine without it. It's like the Nexus in Star Trek Generations. Like, it's the hardest place in the world to leave. And, you know, Picard takes one look at it and goes, right, I'm off. It's like, yeah, crap fucking film. And then Peter and Mary Jane reunite at the cafe she works in now. Happy endings all round. That's it. Spider-Man 3, the end.
Final thoughts, folks.
Oh, at long last.
Yeah, you guys go first. You guys go first.
I'm dying.
Becca, final thoughts on Spider-Man 3.
Final thoughts. Yeah, in somewhere in there is a good film. I just kind of feel it gets buried by too much going on. It's quite busy. But for the time, there are some nice visuals. As we spoke a bit earlier, like the first fight. There's kind of leave a lot to be desired. But then, like the fight between Spider-Man and Sandman, for example, and the visuals around Sandman character are really quite impressive. This film has some good some comedy moments. There's a scene earlier on, we were chatting about this with Dave off air. There's a scene where J. Jonah Jameson is taking like loads of pills and is like, not that one, not that one, not that one, and then he goes to take it and like the whole there's a vibration and the whole bottle explodes. It's comedy ensues, and there's lots of unintentional comedy with Tobey Maguire gurning his way through the latter half of this film. But yeah, for me, sadly, it's probably the worst in this particular trilogy. But as I say, it's not all bad. There are some really good points. It just kind of gets mired and bogged down, really. And yeah, we spoke at the top of the show about Empire and other sort of film magazines giving sort of 3-star reviews. It's pretty much a 3-star movie. It is enjoyable, but gets mired down. But luckily for fans, we do get to see that the Venom character, explored more later on in the series. Chris?
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered all the bases here. This is just a bit of a mess. I think overall, it's compromised not only by wanting to incorporate Venom by a director who is not interested in Venom. It also is just a mishmash into the world building of what the previous few films did. Can't see Venom fitting into Sam Raimi's vision of Spider-Man, and somehow I think the film doesn't help itself with Sam Raimi's vision of Spider-Man. Is Peter Parker's just too. It's just too I've said this like for previous episodes. It's Mary Jane, will you just if I could just be it's that kind of thing. And I think by the time the third film, we're just done with that, and that's a problem in itself. There are individual things in this film that are good and they're actually complete, are well handled. This isn't completely redundant by no means, but I think it's just compromised on a number of things, and it's just a weird sort of mishmash of other stuff that it's hard to sort of put to pinpoint just one reason why this film fails. In many ways, it's probably better if they just left Venom and then and left that to another director to pick up with the series one. I don't know. I think it's just I think it's just where we are at the time. It was probably the wrong decision to do it at that time. I don't know, but at the end of the day, it ain't a very good film.
I think there are so many things in this film that by themselves would sink the film. I think the thing I was angriest about first time was the treatment of Venom, because there was so much hype around it. Those shots were in all the trailers. The symbiote saga was finally being done. I was very skeptical going in because I was a little bit, but you got these other villains. It's not going to be just about Venom, is it? But, the trailer of Brock being finally encased in the, and leaping towards the camera was in the trailer. It looked like it was going to be really kind of cool. And I went in and, he's in the suit for a couple of minutes and he keeps exposing his face. It was the biggest thing with Sam Raimi is stop feeling the need. You have to show the actor's face. Believe in the costumes, please. Because it's frustrating and it just takes me out every single fucking time. It's like, you don't have to take his, mask off so I can see what Toby thinks about it. It's just let them act, let them do what they do. Let the characters, act, have the agency, I mean. So that was a problem. But then Flint Marko, it's like, well played, good look, nice effects for the time. But the characters are fucking misery guts all the way through. And my daughter is lazy. And then you've got the Mary Jane Peters stuff. And it's like, well, you've had 2 films to sell an investment in these 2, and you haven't done it for me. Neither of them are particularly likable. They have no chemistry. He's infatuated with her. He doesn't love her. As I say, the line from Frasier, he's in love at her, not with her. She's been a misery guts for 3 films. Well, the films explain why, and they're valid reasons, but what pleasure is anyone getting out of any of this? They have one nice moment laying in a web hammock. That's it. James Franco, utterly fucking insufferable. And then they use an amnesia storyline. That on its own would sink a film. That's barely worthy of a daytime soap opera. I'm talking American style, because our soap operas don't quite work like that.
But it does go into a bit Dirty Den territory where he remembers and starts trying to break up, blackmails her to break up with. Do you know what I mean?
But even that, it's all over in seconds because they're rushing from one thing to another. The bottom line is Sam Raimi didn't really have a film here. Sony didn't know what they wanted to do, but they wanted to force in certain elements. you know, with Batman, when they went to Nolan for the third film and said, it'll be the Riddler, won't it? What about Leo? And he went, that's not what I'm doing at all. He'd earned enough cachet to just do what he wanted. And I don't love The Dark Knight Rises, but at least, like, they committed to, like, trusting him. I don't think a ton of interference and cramming certain villains in would have helped. Sam Raimi's heart's not in this, not really. You know, I don't think so anyway. His character work is fairly poor anyway. And as a bottom line, it's got two leads that I don't like. You know, Kirsten Dunst I don't wildly dislike either, but she's not served by the material. Tobey Maguire, I couldn't wait for him to be out of the suit. When they announced a fourth one that was going to be like 3 or 4 years on, I thought I'm going to have to wait 4 years for another wine fest from this guy, who by then is going to be pushing 40 anyway. Like, give it a fucking rest. What's coming has a lot of flaws, but its two leads are not amongst them. At the end of this, whatever the relative pleasures of the first two film, and put in something that felt like a comic book on the screen, you know, when that was a novelty, and a great deal of gratitude in me for getting an opportunity to see that. By the end of this film, it had pissed it away so comprehensively that I was just hoping it was done. And as it turned out, it was. And, you know, kind of good riddance to it. I know this is kind of a lot of people's incarnation, but this is pretty poor. And it's the worst kind of poor. It's poor with a good budget, and them having, like, thought at the time they'd made something worthwhile. With Batman and Robin, he committed to a vision that didn't work. This is in line with the first two films. It's not like a soft reboot or anything. It's just lazy. The script's not there. The vision's not there. And it's just not very good.
But, having said that, do you feel like you know the
That's
film?
all fakes.
Do I feel that I what, Chris?
That you know the film.
Oh, you're asking me something now. Oh, God, I've just embarrassed myself, haven't I? I've just been really quite strong on this film, and I've just realised I don't know anything about who's in it.
Emo.
Toby Hooper.
Yes, Toby Hooper.
Toby Joe.
That's not who I would have cast in a Spider-Man film. That's really
Toby
odd.
Jones.
Perhaps Becca can explain a bit more to me. So
Edward Snowden. There you are.
Edward Snowden's in it. And
Edward Van Glockenspiel.
the villain's Thomas Jane, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. And Rosemary and Thyme as the MILF.
As the Herb Sisters.
Gardening detective duo.
Yeah. Handy they were called Rosemary and Thyme, wasn't it? Given they were garden-based and stuff. You know.
Were they actually working out of Midsummer?
Yeah. Anyway, Becca.
This film was so boring. I'm looking forward to my bedtime.
That's
Yes,
fun,
fun
folks.
facts. That's all, folks. I've got a busy day tomorrow. Yes, fun facts. And I've also got a bonus fact at the end. So, yeah, fun fact number one. In Harry's Lab, you can kind of see a lot of nods to Green Goblin. Obviously, the fear of as well as Green Goblin mask from the previous couple of films, and also a Hobgoblin mask, which is a callback to the comics. Fun fact number two. This is one of those little listicle type facts, but I thought was pretty cool. Obviously, now since this film, we've had a few other comic book movies. You might have heard of them. But Sam Raimi was the first director to do 3 superhero movies in a row. By that time, Bryan Singer had only made 2 X-Men films. Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher had only done the 2 Batman movies. And then, of course, Bryan Singer came back to make Days of Future Past. So he kind of tacks on the end of that one. So he kind of does a bit of bookending there. But obviously now, we've had obviously the Marvel and those kind of things, so that kind of overrides that. Fun fact number 3. As we mentioned at the top of the show, this is like one of the highest grossing films of 2007. And the movie's IMAX screenings watched $20 million in 30 days, which at the time was the fastest for a 2D film to be remastered in that format. And it was the most successful US movie not to be nominated for an Oscar, although that's since been replaced by like Dark Knight and Hunger Games sequels. Fun fact number 4.
The Dark Knight sequels. I was going to say Heath Ledger. No, you're right.
Oh, sorry. No, yeah, the Dark Knight movies and the Hunger Games like sequels, for example. Whatever it was called, Catching Fire, or whatever it's called, I can't remember. It was a long time ago now. But yeah, because obviously they grossed really highly when they came out, but they weren't nominated for any Oscars, I don't think.
Bizarre thing about, just as an aside, the bizarre thing about the Hunger Games is the films. Is they're a bit like Avatar in that for the amount of popularity they had no lasting pop cultural influence at all. I'm sure there's a subset of demographic who like the books and stuff like that, but they haven't seeped into like film. The amount of money they
Not
took,
as much, no.
no, you don't get cosplaying around it. You don't get much conversation around it.
No,
Kind
I
of-
think you see a
doesn't
lot
help
of
it
like
when
sort of Katniss like cosplaying as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say she's probably, you know, but maybe give it a few years, I think.
I think it didn't help the series went out with a bit of a wet fart.
I think that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
It did seem to sort of like outstay its welcome movie-wise.
It was
kind of
massive.
an
Yeah, it was
on,
massive
an
for a
on.
couple. And the penultimate one sort of set up the final one quite well, but then Philip Seymour Hoffman died, and the final film was dreadful anyway.
Avatar is a bit difficult though, isn't it? Because it's, you know, certainly within the realm of like costume and that as well. So it's quite interesting. I think it can be done.
Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Let's have a look. But anyway, fun fact number 4. Apparently, in the comics, it's Reed Richards from Fantastic Four who discovers that the like symbiote is actually an alien. However, obviously, the rights to this character are owned by 20th Century Fox. So that's kind of why it was changed to Kurt Connors in this film, who obviously we'll see next time round. And obviously,
Hornblower knows what it is.
looking forward to it. Yes, so fun fact number 5. This is obviously the longest film in the series, or this original trilogy anyway. And it's the first to have the main villain alive at the end. He kind of disappears into the ether, as you know, whisked away by the wind, but he still survives. So there we are. And it's the first film not to end with Spidey swinging around the city as he usually likes to do. Bonus fact: obviously, us 3 are really big fans of Now Playing podcast. It's been a huge influence on us on this show. And so this is the first film actually reviewed on Now Playing podcast. And there's one of about 13, 14, 15 films to be reviewed twice. Obviously once upon release and then again on the retrospective series.
I always find their sort of anniversaries slightly disingenuous because they didn't start doing retrospectives until sort of late 2008.
No, it was quite late in the game,
Spider-Man
wasn't it?
3 was the first one they recorded where like 2 of them just sat in a car park after seeing the film.
Yeah,
a bit of a rant on it. I've never even heard it because Now Playing to me, they can count episodes however they liked, but they, as far as I'm concerned, they started with Friday the 13th.
They did, definitely. But yeah, it just depends on how you look at it, really. But I think this is one of like the very first sort of.
Well, it's
they
their
recorded.
show. They're welcome to say which is their first. And
Well,
they'll
exactly.
correct,
It's
but
their format.
It's not the format they do now. It's not the
No,
presenter.
it's obviously because they've been going.
The same thing.
Well, 10+ years, so they're going to change their format, change the cast, not cast.
It changed about 18 months later.
Presenter lineup.
Like that, and yeah,
They've got to keep it fresh, haven't they? They've been going for many years, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the first time they reviewed this film, obviously it got recommend and 2 non-recommends, and the second time round, it was 3 firm, 3 solid, red arrows pointing down, 3 solid not recommends. So, but yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. A little bit about the history there, which is always good to know.
Yeah, it's one of those films I just found a bit tiresome more than anything else. I was just like, oh, whatever. But anyway, was that the bonus fact?
That's a not really bonus, but bonus fact. Though. I just thought it was quite interesting.
No.
As we're all fans of the show.
I used to be a bigger fan of Now Playing than I now am, not because they're doing anything wrong, but they've monetized more and more, and I can't be asked paying for 35 different podcasts a year and stuff like that, and 2 different campaigns.
Yeah, and plus some of the stuff they monetized in the past is now readily available, and it's like,
They've now done so many that they're running out of interesting things, so an awful lot of the time they'll release an episode on a Tuesday and I'll just look at it and delete it immediately because it's not on a subject I'm interested in. They're very accomplished, they're very different from us, and that's not an insult. They're a lot more
They've done
professional.
all the films.
They're a lot more professional than us, but I think that's also their greatest fault. Anyway, as for social media, you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter at Cinematronics. You can also find all the old episodes at cinematronics.co.uk.
And you can find us on Twitter at Expect Us Talk, and also on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and wherever you download this podcast into your earballs. at do you expect us to talk? And if you want, you can drop us an email, do you expect us to talk at gmail.com.
No, expect us to talk at gmail.com.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Sorry, do you expect
That's all right.
at gmail.com.
Yeah. And if you're still considering banging Sally Field, which is now becoming relevant again as we get on in
we
this
get closer.
series, write to us at expect us to talk at gmail.com. Because next time, Peter Parker is going back to school, which means Becca.
Our Spidey senses tingling once more as Do You Expect to Talk returns with the amazing Spider-Man.